Hey, this is Seth Jump, and you can find me at anatomyonthego.com. So, in this video, I'm going to explore this question, what is anatomy? And also kind of tie in approaches to learning anatomy. So, anatomy could be defined as structures, parts, and components of the body. And so, we're talking about all the different structures that are found within the body itself. So, we're talking about all the skeletal structures, all the muscles, all the nerves and blood vessels, organs, everything that is found within our bodies. And so we can actually approach anatomy by looking at all the structures, parts, and components that are in a particular area, which is a region or regional anatomy. Or we could look at a systems based approach. And ideally, you actually incorporate both approaches into learning anatomy and teaching anatomy. So, let me describe what this means. So, with a regional approach, you're actually learning all the different structures that are in a particular area or region. So, let's just take an example of the abdominal region. In this image, you're seeing the major vein and the major artery in the abdominal area. And so, in blue is the inferior vena cava. This vessel, this vein, brings blood back to the heart. Everything below the heart ultimately goes into this vein and carries blood back to the heart. We have the abdominal aorta indicated in red there. Ultimately carries blood to all the organs, tissues, etc., that are in the abdominal area, and then carries branches ultimately into the lower extremity, the lower limb, the pelvis, the thigh, the leg. We can also take a look at the organs that are in the abdominal region. So in this image, you're seeing the liver, you're seeing highlighted in orange the gallbladder and the pancreas. You see the small intestine, the large intestine. And so, in addition to the organs, you could add nerves. We could talk about connective tissues, all within the abdominal region. You could do the same thing for the thoracic region. You could talk about all the different structures, parts, components that are there. So, for example, there's the trachea carrying air into the lungs as we breathe it in. You can see the lungs themselves. Of course, we have a right and a left lung. There's the left lung and some of the structures that are contained within the lung. You can see the thoracic aorta. Ultimately, this is the tube that changes names as it passes the diaphragm muscle and becomes the abdominal aorta, which you saw on the previous slide. Then you can also see within the thoracic region, you can see the esophagus, ultimately carrying food that we eat into our stomach and then later into our intestines for a further breakdown. You can approach anatomy with a systems based approach as well. So, this is a slide showing the cardiovascular system. And so these are arteries, and by convention, arteries are red in pictures. And so you're actually seeing the arterial supply for the thoracic region, the proximal part of the upper limbs, and also the head and neck. And so we could talk about, when we talk about the cardiovascular system, of course, we're bringing in the heart. We're also bringing in veins, which I'll describe to you in later slides and lessons as well. So let's dive into this and add another wrinkle to learning anatomy. So as highlighted here, we have both the gallbladder and the pancreas, but let's take a look at the pancreas. So there's the pancreas here in this image, and that's highlighted, and that's yellow there, or yellow-orange. So, of course, when you learn what something is, it's only natural to ask what it does. And so, uh, because of this, anatomy and this other thing called physiology, they're linked. They go together pretty well. Now, you can get really deep into physiology, and that's a whole class in and of itself. But let's just dive into what physiology is in general here. So let's just say you eat a starch-based meal or a grain-based meal like starch-based pasta or rice, other type of grain here. Ultimately, you're going to break down that starch into smaller sugars. Let's just say glucose or blood sugar. We need to do something with that blood sugar, and so what we do is we actually stimulate the pancreas to produce this thing called insulin. So insulin then carries the blood sugar into the cells and tissues of our bodies. And so this is actually physiology, what something is doing. So the pancreas has two key hormones. One is insulin, one is glucagon. Insulin is known as the hormone of feasting. And so as soon as we have a bunch of blood sugar, we need to do something with that, and that's where insulin comes into play. So physiology is basically, these are the processes that take place within the anatomy. And it's only natural you're going to have some physiology when you're learning anatomy. Now, physiology can be its own class, of course, as I've mentioned. There's tons of information here, down to cell signaling, blood pressure regulation. It gets pretty complex. But naturally, you're just going to incorporate some so you have an idea of what these things are actually doing. So anatomy is parts, organs, tissues, skeletal structures, everything that we find in the body, and then also relevant physiology. So how do you learn all this stuff? Um, let's take a look just at the simplicity of the systems. So the systems-based approach, and I'll guide you through each system as we go. Skeletal system, of course, is all the bones that we have in our body. Muscular is the muscles of our body. And we'll talk about the cardiovascular system. This is the heart and the blood vessels. Respiratory, the tubes that carry air into our lungs, like the trachea, the bronchial tubes, and then ultimately the lungs themselves and the smaller structures we find within the lungs. Nervous system, brain, spinal cord, nerves. Endocrine system, these are our glands, and then the hormones that are produced by the glands that go to cells and tissues to tell the cells and tissues to do something specific. Then we could bring in and we could talk about the immune system, more of an abstract system. You can't see it as well as, like, for example, muscles, but keeps our body healthy, wards off pathogens, viruses, maintains just the health and well-being of our body. Digestive system, all the tubes, structures and accessory organs which help us break down food when we eat it. Urinary excretory, we're talking about the kidneys and how they regulate blood pressure, for example. Excretory is how we excrete what we don't want. And this actually ties into the integumentary as well. It has an excretory function too. But the integumentary, these are the skin. This is the skin and the layers of the skin and the associated structures that support the skin, including blood vessels within the dermal layer, and also glands like oil glands and sweat glands. And then lastly, the reproductive. We'll talk about what are the structures that support an organism within the female tract for 40 weeks, and then how basically males produce sperm at a clip of 400 million per day. There are some other estimates on that, but that's a crazy clip, right? So we'll talk about all those structures there. So what I'll do is, what I have done rather, and what I do now is highlight this, is I've created this guide called Preparing to Ace Anatomy. It's free and it's on my website. It provides some frameworks for learning anatomy, including tips, hints, study guides, or to help you kind of establish a way to approach anatomy, because there's a ton of information. It can be pretty overwhelming. So grab that. It's free, and you can find it on my website. And then, of course, just head over there. I'm providing podcasts, PDFs, videos to help you learn the systems. And then after the systems, we'll dive into other things as well. But feel free to also send me an email. There's my email. And just say, hey, I could use a little bit of help with this or that. And I'll create a video, a PDF, shoot you an email back just to kind of help you get your bearings on this. So that's a wrap for this video, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.